What up? We're back. Today, I promised you guys that I would do my best to make a SPC Upper Control Arm install video for the 3rd gen 4Runner. That's Faith back there in the background. Here's a tip for you guys that don't know. You might have heard of them if you're a 3rd gen guy, or for that matter, if you're just a car guy, truck guy, and you're interested in putting a set of these on your vehicle. These are adjustable. So I got them from Rock Auto, and here's a tip I was gonna give you guys. If you look at most places, there are a few other companies that sell them brand specific under the name SPC Upper Control Arms. What you may not know, if you go on Rock Auto and you go under Toyota 4Runners between 96 and 02, and you look for SPC Upper Control Arms, you will not find them. There's no SPC Upper Control Arm. The trick and the tip is that you have to look for Mevotech, and they should be on the very bottom. There should be a right and a left. They are the exact same thing. The part number is CMS 861193. This is the other arm, and this part number is CMS 861192. You can tell they're only off by a number each. These upper control arms are actually, the new ones are all cast. The other ones were a tube with a cast centerpiece, but now the whole thing is cast. And then you have a upper ball joint that goes in. It's greasable, the Zerk fitting up here. Based on how you set it per the instructions, you get more caster, more camber, and some other adjustments. I'm not really big on this stuff. I just know that it helps my truck, and it's gonna help me get it dialed in the way I need to have it dialed in, especially because I'm taking a 2,000-mile road trip. I've been driving on the original upper control arms. My ball joints right now are perfectly fine, my upper ball joints, and I've had no issues for the week that I've been driving it. But at the same time, I wanna make sure everything is dialed in, so that is exactly why I picked these up. I will put the parts for both arms in the details below. Why does Mevotech sell SPC control arms? It's just a rebrand. It's kind of like what I was saying on my last video about Eibach. They make private label stuff for other companies, but as you can tell, I pulled it out of the box, and I'm hoping you can see there's embossing right here, and it says SPC right there. US patent number, it's the exact same thing. It's even got an L right there for the left side, so that's the driver's side. And it's gonna go in just like that, and the other one will go in just like that, and we will set the adjustments. I will do my best to dial these in and make this video as informative as possible. I'm not really good at that kind of thing because most of the time I forget to instruct to the camera what it is I'm doing. So I'll do my best, like I said, to take care of that. But these are all fresh bushings, obviously, and the ball joint is fresh. You do have to grease your ball joint. If you do not have a grease gun handy, you may run into some issues in the sense of driving this down to your local shop. Also, don't just go to any shop. Go to a shop that knows exactly what they're doing. I called the shop down the street. They told me all I have to do is get the settings right. So I'm gonna put it on a D setting. From what I've read, that seems to work just fine for the 3rd gen application on a modified suspension with about 1.5 inches. So I'm gonna give that a shot, and we're gonna see how it goes. Let's do it. So to make your life simpler, it may be smart to disconnect your brake line from behind the caliper. If you can, flare nut wrenches. If not, if you don't have flare nut wrenches, take your time getting this off. And then the one holding the brake line is a 12mm bolt right here on the backside of the brake line. Before we pull off any major components like the castle nut up here, definitely PB blast that. If you have anything that's rusty as far as bolts go, we're gonna remove this bolt up here as well. This holds the ABS line, so it's smart to just get this up and out of the way while we can. We wanna remove this ABS line holder as well. This is going to unclasp once we get the bolt out here. You're gonna just spread this entire unit apart. It kind of spreads and folds over the spindle here, as well as removing this 10mm bolt for the ABS sensor. Don't forget to PB blast some of these things if you can. It is gonna make your job a lot easier. That's just so we can move the spindle and tilt it this way. We should be able to remove the ball joint on this side. I was able to do it on the other side prior to this yesterday. I did a test run, got the other side without issue. Ran into a few small problems. The ball joint press that I have didn't have the proper size to fit over the ball joint as a whole, so I did have to cut the ball joint. Some of you may have to do that if the AutoZone kit you pick up doesn't work. I found that using my rotary tool was super beneficial. and I just cut the ball joint off. So I'll show you that. These are 19mm bolts that hold the upper control arm in, if you can see that there. And then we're going to remove this plastic covering, and the other bolt should be back there. As you can see, this is the nut that we are going to ratchet off, and we are going to hold the other side, which goes all the way through. When I remove stuff, I have this nifty little magnetic tray, and I'm going to put all my bolts that I take off in here, and that'll help me keep track of things. Now you can use hand tools to get these out, but I prefer to use power tools if you got them. The top bolt's 10mm. This bolt is also 10mm. Once this bolt is removed, it's very easy to remove. You just spread it and it should bend out, and you can remove the ABS wire and bracket from the spindle. ABS sensors on the other side. It's kind of hard to have the camera pointing at it, but I showed it to you earlier. When the ABS sensor bolt is removed, remove the ABS sensor. Before we remove the brake line, you want to try and make sure, if you can, to pick up a set of flare nut wrenches. As you can tell, this is a little bit more extended when we're talking about how it goes on the nut versus if you look at a standard wrench. I know these are different sizes, but you can see that this only really grips 3 sides. And this just helps so you don't round the nut holding the brake line in, because if you do, you're kind of screwed. I have a few different vacuum plugs handy for when I pull this out, because it is going to continue to leak. And this is a 10mm brake line connector. You will need to bleed the brakes when you're done with this job. Some people may say this is unnecessary to disconnect the brake line, but I found it much easier to move the spindle around and bend the spindle out of the wheel well to get to the upper ball joint later. When it comes loose, it starts to leak. You'll want to fit a nice tight vacuum cap on there, and that should prevent it from leaking. So I'm still going to hold it on the left and impact over here. Unscrew the bolt, pull the fitting off. Now what we're going to want to do is get the bolt out on this side, which can be a little bit of a pain in the butt. It has to come all the way out this way. The problem is the frame of the vehicle will kind of get in the way. So when we pull the bolt, this fitting right here that's spinning is going to want to come out, and it's going to block the bolt from coming out. So every time we pull the bolt out, we're going to have to push the fitting back in, bolt out, fitting back in until we can extract the bolt completely. Just a quick note, when you do go to put some bolts back in, if you go out and get yourself a little bit of anti-seize, it's going to make your job easier in the future if you need to pull anything out. It should keep things from rusting to the holes that they go into. I love this stuff. It works really well. You don't need to buy this brand, but any type of anti-seize, I buy the standard one, I think. This one doesn't have any copper in it. All right, so what we want to do next is, like I said, we want to remove the bolt. The problem is this positive cabling is in the way. There is a plastic piece right here that you can see holding it. There's a piece of metal that juts out, and this kind of like hooks onto that. We want to just put positive pressure. You want to push, there's a little tab that you want to push on away from you. It's kind of on the back side, it's hidden. You want to push on, and it should slide right off. That bracket comes out with a 10mm, otherwise we can't back the bolt out. Just to give you a better angle of what I was talking about, the bolt here has to push all the way through like we said earlier, but this right here is the screw that holds the bracket in place. Another issue I ran into, you'll see right here, the battery's missing because, well, when you try and pull the bolt out, I didn't realize this. This is an airbag sensor, if I'm correct. It's in the way of the bolt here. I didn't realize it because the battery was over the top. and until I tried to pull it out, it hit something. The best way to get to this is removing the battery and then removing the 2 bolts that hold it in place and let it hang and place the bolts back in so I don't lose them. Now it should be much easier to access the bolt. I felt like I was getting more resistance trying to pull the bolt out than I should have. So I'm going to remove the upper control arm from the lower ball joint, or vice versa. But first I need to remove this cotter pin here, and then I can zip this castle nut off and then use the puller to push the ball joint out. All right, after much trial and deliberation, it finally came out. You can get this castle nut however you please. I aim to use my impact. Now we need to push the ball joint through the upper control arm so we can remove the control arm from the joint and then later take the joint out. It's as simple as releasing some of the spindle so that the arms can go on both sides of the control arm. Once the arms both fit snugly and you can pull up without it letting go is when you want to tighten it down. That's how you want it to look. Then we're going to crank on this part. I believe this is a 17. It's flexing because the bolt has been pulled out. And there we go, it broke through. Now we can lift the upper control arm. Okay, once I removed the upper ball joint, I slid back the bolt that was right here, pulled it out, and then just yanked the upper control arm right out. If you're like me, you're gonna have a bunch of dirt and grime built up around the edge. If you have a brush, go ahead and just brush all that away. There is a wire that runs around the rubber boot, and that is kind of hard to see, but you're gonna wanna cut that wire and remove the rubber boot. When you do that and then brush away, you're gonna see a circlip that goes on the very bottom edge that holds the lower ball joint in place. We are going to need to use a set of pliers to remove that. These are the ones that I have. When you squeeze, the top opens versus closing, and that will go when I find the edge of the circlip on both interior portions of it, push out, and we'll get it off the ball joint. I see the wiring in here, and that's essentially what we want to cut out. So I'm just going to use a set of die cutters to cut that. Once you cut it, the wire should come off just like that. And then the boot will take a little finessing, but should, well, there we go, come off without issue. We're going to want to wipe all that grease away with paper towels if we have them. I just get it enough that where it kind of pops up like this on here, and then I leverage it off and I'm able to get it out of there. Some of you may have the proper kit to get this ball joint out and just press it out. Unfortunately, my kit didn't have the proper thing, so I need to cut my ball joint first and then put it on so it can lay flush here and push it out the bottom end. So I'm gonna have to cut mine with my Milwaukee rotary. Okay, now that the upper ball joint's been removed or cut off, I can set this on there and it should fit and allow me to press the ball joint through to the bottom. We have a catch cup here that's gonna go underneath. I just ran it through with my impact. You would essentially have it up like this, and then the ball would be underneath and caught up in there. And then you could crank on this with a large ratchet if you have it. I had my impact with a 22, just pushed it and ran it through until it fit. Okay, so we're almost ready for install. I'm just gonna clean this up with the brush a bit more, wipe in here, and then I'm gonna apply a little grease to the inside of here, as well as the ball joint receiver attachment that's going to come out of the kit, which I'll show you in a second. Here's a welcome piece of information. When you go to place this, it's got to come from the bottom. But one thing you'll be happy to know is you actually don't have to press this in. This can be easily put in with a dead blow hammer. Before I put it in, I am going to put a little bit of grease on it. And then I'm going to just make sure I get that grease around all the sides. Once I have it greased up, I'll seat it in there so it sits. You should be able to apply a little bit of pressure and it should sit without any issue. So now I'm just going to tap it in. All right, so to me that looks flush, and the way to confirm, you can just run your nail along the edge and see if you can feel the circlip indent where you're going to be putting this new circlip that comes with the kit. That's going to be this one right here. This is a fresh new one that comes with the kit. Do not try and reuse the old one. Again, I'm going to use my pliers. Give it. Once you get one side on, you can kind of work it around the edge. And once it's seated, it's not going anywhere. We can get the upper control arm started. When we go to get the upper control arm in, we get 2 new plates for the outsides that go between the bolt and the bushing. Make sure you put these on, and we're using the new ones, not the old ones. All right, so this was kind of a pain in the butt to get back in. It will help if you have a second person to help you get the bolt through. Again, don't forget your piece here that came with the kit. It is also recommended that you pull up and remove the overflow bottle for your coolant. Pull up on the bottle, give it a few shakes. It should just slide right on top of a piece that holds it in place. Once you remove that, it should be easy to get the bolt straight in. And then you're gonna reuse the old nut as well as a new washer. And we're gonna get this. This is supposed to be 85 foot-pounds. It might be kind of hard to get it considering I'm by myself and also need to hold opposing force on the opposite side, but I'm gonna do my best to get this extremely tight. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do is get the ball joint at least set up and put in place. And with a 1.5 to 2 inch lift, from what I've seen, what most people do is they do a desetting. If anything needs to be reset, I will let the shop handling that take care of it. So desetting is essentially just leaving it like that and putting it on. Make sure you take the circular washer off that goes on top and put the bolt back on so nothing slides out of place. And then I'm just gonna move things over kind of towards the center of the upper control arm. The center, it pivots and it slides in and out for your camber. So I'm gonna move it as close to the center as possible. Again, I'm gonna let the shop take care of that. That has to be torqued down to 150 foot-pounds. Next, I'm going to get the upper ball joint in the receiver and push it down on there. And it should hold itself for me to get at least the castle nut in place. This castle nut has to be torqued down to 45 foot-pounds. The top nut has to be torqued down to 150 foot-pounds. However, because the shop is gonna have to make adjustments, I'm only gonna torque the top to about 80 or 90 and then let them get everything in order. Getting it torqued down to 80 or 90 will allow me just to get it to the shop down the street. Most shops may not know what they're doing with these, so before you take it to a shop, confirm that that shop knows what they're doing when it comes to SPC upper control arms, because it just adds more dynamic settings to your suspension, and a lot of shops may not know how to get things in order with these upper control arms. Okay, torque the bottom one to 45 foot-pounds. Get your cotter pin. You're gonna put it through either way and then bend it over. All right, that's pretty much it for the install. I hope I didn't miss anything. Just pay attention to everything that you do along the way and go ahead and do the reverse process after you get the ball joint in and tighten it down to about 80 foot-pounds. Don't drive far, don't hit any heavy bumps. And when you do pick a shop, hopefully it is close by, because any type of road jarring or anything like that can loosen the top bolt. That's why 150 foot-pounds is recommended. I mean, that's almost double what your wheel lug nuts are gonna be. just to give you an idea of how tight that is. So that should prevent any future jarring or loosening of anything. But it shouldn't be required just to get it down to the shop if it's only a few miles away. If it is further away, tighten it more, but they are going to loosen it to get things dialed in. If I missed anything, I apologize. It's the next morning and we are taking Faith to the alignment shop. When you're first about to take off with your SPC Upper Control Arms installed, and you may not have checked this, but I recommend taking a look at it beforehand, because the top nut can slide in about 1.5 inch, 2 inch well. Highly suggest you set that to the middle before tightening the bolt down. I set my bolt to 95 foot-pounds, and right now I don't notice anything crazy with the vehicle, but when I had the vehicle on the ground, when I finally had everything kind of put back together and set up, I did notice the wheels were super positive camber. You could see it as it was sitting. So what I did was I loosened the bolt and then I pushed back on the wheel a little bit, and it'll give, like, no problem. Once you have that bolt loosened up enough, it should slide back and forth in there. The problem is when you push on it and then you try and step away from the wheel, it will like automatically slide back to out, because that's just like the simplest position. Gravity and the pressure from the vehicle pushing down on the upper control arms makes the wheel want to just push back out. I highly suggest you have a large ratchet with your 32mm socket to at least tighten it down enough that it's not going to slide right there in that position. Once you have that set up, then grab your torque wrench and kind of torque it to 95. 150 is the torque spec needed for the top nut, but because we are taking this to the alignment shop and they're most likely going to have to break it loose and get everything in order, I didn't tighten it down to 150 for that specific reason. We are 1 week post install on the SPC Upper Control Arms. I got them dialed in at a shop local to me. Like I said to you guys beforehand, I double checked. I made sure that they could do the alignment without any issues. I've heard horror stories, guys jacking things up and everything's off because they don't know what they're doing. And that wouldn't surprise me, considering most shops probably don't deal with them too often. It is a very specific and niche type of vehicle that is going to use those, at least to my knowledge. So make sure you call ahead of time, or ask a friend, or if you're a third gen guy or in the Toyota community, someone somewhere has probably gone to a shop. If you're in Southern California, I'm based out of Corona. I'm lucky enough that there's a shop right down the street from me that could do it. That's called Circle City Brake and Alignment. They did it for me in about 2 hours. I left my car there. It cost $70, and the only thing I had to do, and it doesn't surprise me at all, I told them to make sure they tighten the top nut to 150, which I don't know if they even bothered to try and do, but I always double check when I get home, and I got a brand new torque wrench that I've been itching to use as much as possible. So I use that to make sure that I cinch down the top nuts to 150. If you do not do that, there is a good chance you're going to loosen the top bolt, and your camber is going to be all out of whack within days or weeks if you hit any major potholes or anything like that. So cinch that top bolt down to 150 foot-pounds. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the install video. I always try and do my best when I make these things. I can't guarantee that it is the best video you're going to watch for them, but I didn't see one up for 3rd gen 4Runners, so I hope it's useful. Some of you may not have to do the thing that I did with cutting the upper ball joint. For those of you that have the proper piece, you could probably resell your upper ball joint and upper control arm, but for me, I had to press it out, so I had to cut it. So more power to those that have the proper pieces in order to get it out. Thank you so much for watching, and everything that you do, make sure you are always seeking the stoke. Take care.